good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter what time of the day it is for you, we really appreciate you being with us today because it's really an honor, it's a privilege, and it's a pleasure. And today I think we have a jam-packed episode that we're going to go through. And this jam-packed episode is entitled, Are You Prepared? Are you prepared? And we're going to go through and we're going to share some sagas with you from each of us of things that have happened that we really weren't prepared for. And that's what we're going to go to. So right now, I'm going to cut to our intro music. We'll be right back and we're going to start into the meat and give you some real value because today, again, we want to share some really deep thoughts with you out there. You know, every time we play that, I look and Brandi, I see you standing there in a classroom in that intro, and I look at all the people we've had as guests at various times on there, and it's like a who's who of people that can help you in business. So today it's all about, are you prepared? And what we're talking about is those things in your life that jump at you totally unexpectedly and in a form just create tremendous chaos and where you have to go through often reinvention. And to give you a little examples, the first book I ever published was titled Chaos to Reinvention. And this was my story about chaos that I went through in my personal life. So, Brandi, I'm going to start with you this morning. What's a story that you could share with our listeners of when this chaos has hit you totally unexpected, and then you had to reinvent from it? But as you did this, if you'll remember right, you could actually look back and see those signs. You just were oblivious to the signs. So what's your story today, Brandi?
Yeah, I have several, as well as a lot of tips on if this happens to you, what to do. The first one I guess I would talk about would be the first and only time I've ever hired an office manager from the outside. And what I mean is I hired her off the streets as an office manager. She didn't work for me prior to that. Everybody else I had promoted from within. And spent a lot of time training with her, sat by her side for 3 weeks, taught her how to do everything I do. Was just super excited because I was coaching at this time. And so it meant that I could devote more time to that. There were little lies that were happening that I thought were lies, but I didn't have any proof. And then one day I had the proof for the lie and I had to terminate her. Basically, I hired a pathological liar and didn't know it. And so at this time, I had to actually call you guys and tell you I'm going to have to go back to being the office manager and I can't coach right now. I don't have the time for it.
Right. And that was part of the challenge, Brandi, because actually that was where you could no longer work with the people that were depending on you. You couldn't help us, and we depend on you greatly for the strengths. So this created chaos for all of us. In fact, when you came back to coaching, people that you had worked before, they jumped on your services just like that. I want her back. And it was really, but you learned a lot from that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So now we'll go to Sheryl. Sheryl, what about you? What's an episode in your life of where you were not prepared, it caught you totally by surprise, created tremendous chaos, and then where you had to reinvent? What's your story?
Well, actually, this happened back in 2010 when I bought IBD out from you and took complete ownership. And we announced to the company that they were going to have a new owner, but everything would stay the same. Salaries would stay the same. Their position in the company would stay the same. But then we told them who it was. And every one of them but one walked out the door. I was left with one employee and weeks worth of work.
Right. We were heavily backed. And not only that, because of what was going on, I had to leave the company at that time. And realistically, I couldn't even help you in this period because it would have been a problem because of what we were going through personally. So again, what we're going to talk about today is how you prepare for this and where you don't go through this. Now, my story is it goes back into the 1990s. And in the 1990s, I was teaching a series of seminars around the United States called D&D courses. And I had set one up in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the reason I set it up in Charlotte was that my workforce could attend this seminar. Because what I had figured out from training was that if my employees came to a seminar that I was teaching and other people bought into the principles, it helped sink it into them. In fact, I've flown men to Cincinnati, Ohio before to hear me speak. But what happened was it was about 10 minutes till 12 on a Friday afternoon. And several of my guys came up and said, Doc, we need to talk to you, because Doc was what they called me because the name of the company was the Chimney Doctor. And I went out and said, we need to see you out in the hall a minute. So yeah, I walked out there. I got no idea what's going on. Figured somebody probably had to borrow some money for lunch or something here this day. And they said, hold out your hands. And I held out my hands, and they all laid their company keys, their pagers, their credit cards in my hands. And I said, and this was in September. And I said, what in the world is all this? Well, we just want to let you know that we're all quitting. I said, say what? We're all quitting. I said, quitting when? Effective right now. And at that point, they walked out of my office, or excuse me, walked out of the hotel lobby. Now, this is in September, Brandi, and imagine your workforce not being there like this, totally unprepared. Even worse, they had set this up to do it before I was walking into presenting a major seminar for a group of people through a weekend. It was a 2.5-day seminar. And Sheryl can tell you how emotionally this tore me up. But at the same time, I had a commitment. And as a presenter, the show must go on. And what was even worse, I had people in this class, to be honest with you, they weren't my favorite people, but I had to go in and produce this. But Monday morning, we had to reinvent a company. Okay. And these are the kind of things that happen. So we wanted to share these things with you today. And I want to put in the thought processes, because this is often what happens. And here's my question to you out there, if you're listening. What happens if your office manager decides to quit tomorrow morning? What happens if your operations manager decides that tomorrow morning he's not going to be there any longer? Maybe he gives you a notice, maybe he doesn't. Or even worse, what happens if there's a terrible tragedy that one of your key people gets hurt, or worse? It happens. And then you go through that emotional turmoil also of someone working for you being hurt or injured, or worse, and possibly on a job site. So what do you do? How do you prepare? If you listen to what Brandi said, the indications were there. They truly were there, because I can remember Brandi and myself talking at that point. So that's what we want to share with you today, and why we entitled this, Are You Prepared? Or let me give you another scenario. And this is a true scenario that recently happened to a client. What happens on a Friday afternoon when you find a website that one of your employees has up on the internet, where they are going to be competing with you while they're still working for you? That happened just a few weeks ago to one of my clients on a Friday afternoon. But again, were the signs there? Yes. Did the signs get ignored? So, Brandi, I'm going to start with you. With what we've just talked about, how, in your opinion, do we prepare? Because we have these personal experiences. And one thing that I know about life is you learn a lot. It's just like when you start having children, you don't know how to be a parent, but yet as you go through it, and I often kid with Brandi, it's like, Brandi, they're teenagers now. I don't even think you're prepared for what's going to happen when they become adults. And she's shaking.
I don't want him to leave.
It's just like already, it's like, we're already planning on visiting Noah at college where he's going. My thought was, well, maybe Noah just don't want to see you that often, Brandi. It's like, so Brandi, what's your advice to people to be prepared?
So one of the ways that you can prepare and maybe get a clue that it's coming and maybe even prevent it is what we've talked about before, Jerry, with the stay interview. So everybody does exit interviews. So the employee leaves and they do an exit interview to find out why they left. Well, if it's a great employee, it's too late at that point. So one of the things that we recommend is doing a stay interview. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I believe it's episode 49 of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network podcast. And in that, we go over a lot of the different questions to ask during a stay interview. But basically what a stay interview is it's seeing if they're happy there. You're asking them, what is the best day you've ever had at work? What's the worst day you've ever had at work? What would prompt you to leave the company? And so you're assessing really their happiness with the company. I know that we've had 2 guys that have been with me for 5+ years, and both of them in their annual review, we do a stay interview. And both of them at different times over the years have expressed interest in maybe going somewhere else. They're both still here. We always talk through it, talk about what their goals are, why they're thinking about leaving, and then see if there's something that we can do to help them meet those goals and stay. One of the other things that you can do if somebody does decide to leave, you can see if they can, and they're a good employee. I'm not talking about the bad ones. The bad ones we don't care about. If they're a good employee, you can see if they're willing to stay on an extra week or 2 to help get you through. I remember I hired a CSR one year, and I pretty much expect that when I hire somebody, they're probably going to start in 2 weeks. And she said, well, can I start in a month? Because my current job wants me to stay and train the next person. And so we did that, and I was perfectly fine with that. And I thought, well, that's actually a really great idea. Most recently in our company, my CSR that's been with me for 3+ years came to me and said she wanted to go back to school full time. And so she was putting in her 2 weeks notice. Now, one of the biggest things that we tell you is don't take this personally. And what does Brandi do? I just break down crying not because I was so happy for her that she wanted to do that, but I really love her and enjoy working with her, and she's excellent at her job. And so I was sad to lose that. However, we asked her what her school schedule was, and we were able to work out where she's here part-time with us. So she's part-time here, part-time school. She didn't even know that was an option. She figured she was just going to have to put in her 2 weeks notice. So we were able to salvage that. There are things such as counter offers. And I think, Jerry, we've talked to some of our group coaching clients about this at different times, where somebody comes and they say, I'm going to XYZ company because they're going to pay me $5 more an hour. And then at that point, you have the option, if you want to keep them, to offer them that $5, maybe $6 an hour, or let them go. In most cases, I would say let them go, because they've already made up in their mind. They're already checked out of the company. So in most cases, I would say let them go. It's very rare. The only time I have recommended to clients that they do a counter offer is when they have that great person who wants to leave and it is September. And I say maybe offer them a big bonus if they stay with you through January and get you through the busy season, and then they can leave.
Right.
Make sure, though, that you have a protocol in place. And I don't know if you want me to keep talking, Jerry, because I'll just keep talking all day. I have lots more. Or if you want to go on to somebody else. Because when they leave, you need to know what exactly you have to do. You need to know your state's laws on the last paycheck. I'm in Kansas, and so I'm able to, when somebody leaves, give them their last paycheck just on our next pay date. There are states that you have to give them their last paycheck by the end of their last working day. So you need to be familiar with that. You need to have a checklist of what you need to do, what systems you need to take out, what keys you need to get back from them, because you're not going to remember all of that in the moment. Is there anybody else on that team that could fill their shoes? Is this an opportunity for, you've lost your main guy, but you have this guy over here who's been doing really well? Can he step up and fill those shoes? This is a great opportunity for the employees, which brings me to telling the employees. You want to make sure that when you tell them that you are explaining that, hey, this is an opportunity for you guys to move up, because it can get very emotional. Jerry, you talked about them all leaving and Sheryl all leaving at once, and that can certainly happen. They can all be like, well, forget it. Joe's gone, then it's going to be a horrible place to work. So I'm leaving too. And they all leave. Let them know that this is a good thing and that it's an opportunity, and have your hiring plan in place, because we do want to fill that position. Still have a going away party for them if they put in their 2 weeks notice and it's going to be a good thing. See if maybe it is that employee that leaves on Friday. I probably wouldn't give them a going away party because they didn't stay for 2 weeks. That's one of the big things when we're interviewing people. I ask them, if you were offered the position, when could you start? And if they tell me, well, I'd want to give my previous job 2 weeks, then they've got an A+. But I've had some say, oh, well, I can start tomorrow. And they have no intention of giving that company 2 weeks. And that's a no-no for me, because when the time comes, they're going to do the same thing to me. During the stay interview, one of the things too is to ask them, what drew you to this company? Then I want you to ask that during the exit interview as well. So when they're preparing to leave, ask them, okay, you're going to this roofing company. What drew you there? And let them tell you if it was the money, if it was the culture, exactly what it was. I still want you to do an exit interview. And there's different ways you can do this. There are companies out there that you can hire that will do the exit interview for you, so you're completely out of it. That's a good way to get raw, honest feedback. You can do it face-to-face on their last day, or you can mail it to them. And it really just depends. I've mailed it to them and I've done it face-to-face. And it honestly depended on the person and which way I thought I was going to get the most honest feedback from them. Let's see.
Brandi, I'm going to let you think for just a minute. Okay, I'm coming back to you. Don't worry.
I might have gone over it all now.
I know. So, but anyway, while we're doing that, I want to send a hello out to everybody that's made comments. Lee Rolfe, Julie Dent, Larry Cookingham, and also we've got a young lady on here that Sheryl and I met in Las Vegas when we did the home inspector show. Her name's Ashley Doug. And Ashley wrote a really great post about meeting us and all that. So Ashley, I appreciate what you said about us and really appreciate you being on here today, because you had some overwhelming thoughts when I saw those. So I appreciate that. So anyway, and I will remember when Olivia left there, and Olivia taught me so much about the younger generation and how we actually put a course up. And Ashley is featured on our educational platform of teaching millennials how to use and educated us immensely about the way they feel. So a lot of these are losses more than just you. So Sheryl, being prepared, okay, you've had a major manufacturing facility that you now own, and you got no workforce. Now it's 10 years later, and you've done pretty good, and you're still surviving. So what's your advice? How do you be prepared?
Well, with the situation I had, Brandi pretty well covered the board on the general situation, but when you have a full walkout, there's not a whole lot you can do except, as we say here in the South, put your big girl panties on and go to work. But yeah, we were able within 24 hours, I got things pretty much started. Within 48 hours, I was back running at full strength with none of the former employees. So a lot of it, you have to be prepared mentally, because as your work first walked out and mine did, a lot of it takes on the mentality of what do I do if, and where can I go? And you start pulling strings and you figure it out. Now, we did find out their main thought was to hold me over the gun and raise their salary to make them come back, which I did not. I didn't offer any of them the job back. I would not hire, did have several try to come back and would not let them, which actually made it good for the new people I had hired. But that you can never prepare for. But as Brandi has come up with, there's so many ways you can prepare with the people that are in you. Now, I do a lot of the same things Brandi's been talking about in the manufacturing plant now, because I don't want that fiasco again. But there's things you're never prepared for, but there are so many more that with a little bit of strategic planning, you can be there. Extra employees. I mean, I hire 12 months out of the year now. I always want resident employees. I also cross-train. Now, if I lost David, which is one of my main players, yes, it would be very hard to replace him, but there are people ready to step up that will take a little more training to get there. But you do what you've got to do. Don't just throw in the rag and quit.
Right. And see, this is part of what this goes down to, because many times our workforces are almost like families. I still remember that day in that hotel lobby as they did this. And in my mind, it's running through. Does he not remember when I paid for a funeral for a baby that they had that they couldn't afford it? Did he not remember when he was hurt and in his home when I went and physically picked the man up and put him in my Suburban to take him to a chiropractor so we could get his back working? And these are the things that go through your minds as you look at it, because this is part of what you're doing to build a culture. And as I listen to Brandi, one of the key things is, and I've got to honestly say this, from being in Brandi's operation, she communicates with her people. And right now, she's sitting in her office at Blues Brothers, but I know some days of the week she's working from a home office. Cheryl's working right now from her home office. She's not at her factory, and she depends. But again, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to open your eyes to the signs. Listen to what Brandi said. The signs were there. Sometimes we want to deny those signs. We just don't want to accept it that it's happening. You've got to be very aware of the culture within your company, because often there's going to be someone in there that's going to be the leader of dissension. I'm very serious. And a lot of times we don't know that this is going on. But I'm going to give you some examples of the preachings and the practices of several people, including myself. And this is one of the reasons that Sheryl was able to recover so fast. Plus, it was combined with an economic downturn. So finding people was not like it is in 2021. People were begging for jobs. NASCAR had laid off fabricators. It wasn't hard. But again, the secret was in the systems. And there's two people besides myself. Now, back in the 1990s, I heard a guy speak, and his name was Michael Gerber. And he's the author of a book called The E-Myth. And he taught all about writing systems and having systems in the business. Because if you're an employer right now on this call, I want you to imagine in your how much information is between these two ears. Now, when you hear Sheryl say she recovered in 48 hours because she was able to find skilled people and hand them a written SOP of everything to do in that factory. How do you do everything? Now, one of the people that is a very valued client of mine and Brandi's, and he's been on this show, is Josh Kelly. Brandi, how extensive is Josh's knowledge base?
I've said before, I think he's probably on like the Mensa level of knowledge, and just, I mean, he's extraordinarily smart.
Correct. And he never stops adding to this. It's like every couple days I get an email that says, review this, review this. The flow chart that he has for that business of how they handle that work, how comprehensive is that flow chart, Brandi?
Oh my gosh. It took me a while just to review it. And actually I had a meeting with his office yesterday, and then we were going through it again. He has set up something that nobody in our industry has, which is like an intranet. And I mean, everything you can think of is in there, to the point where I could probably walk in there. We could probably take Joe Schmo off the street, could walk in there and could be up to speed very quickly, because it all just lives right there in this intranet.
Yeah, it does. And it's truly remarkable. Now, another guy that we've had on as a guest and we're going to have him back, is a guy that I met back in 2010 at the NCSG convention. He was the keynote speaker. It might have been 2011, but it was in that range. And his name was Al Levy. And what did Al Levy talk about? Because I got to know him because he was working with Bob Ferrari's company. And Al is a professor and expert at manuals and systems. And this is what you've got to have. You've got to have all the information that these people will walk out of the door with, that it's down in paper. And Brandi, we both know that this is a challenge. I can still remember. Sheryl, do you remember when we were running a retail business and I asked you to write your SOP, which basically was a prescription to replace you? How did you feel at that point when I asked you to do that?
Oh, you throw up two sides. The one is, okay, is he trying to get rid of me? But I knew you had to eat, so I knew that wasn't going to happen. But it's really hard to do yourself because you think superficial when you're thinking about yourself. You don't delve down into the things that you really are. So it was hard for me. In fact, I could not write the complete thing myself. I had to have help to do my own.
Right. So I go back to that day, 1990. I'm teaching the seminar. I can still remember the hotel, where I was, who was in the class that day. So what did we do on Monday morning? We had a backup. We had the backup. And the backup was, I had a second string. Okay. I had a second string because we had helpers on every one of those trucks. And every helper that we had, you may call them a helper, you may call them a laborer, whatever, you may call them an apprentice. But we had them trained that we didn't miss a beat on Monday morning. We didn't miss a beat. We kept going because we had that second string. And I'm going to reach down in my cabinet and get something here real quick. Now, this was prior to the digital days, okay, Brandi? We didn't have the digital. So what you're looking at right now, that's the way, and there is volumes of this, pages and pages of systems.
I hope Josh isn't watching this right now because he just fell over dead seeing that.
Well, it is, and one of the things is Josh is a Google freak. Okay. Me and you both know that. Everything, and I hate Google Docs. You understand that. I'm a Word document guy. And so anytime, Josh a lot of times has me go something. In fact, this week I told Josh, I said, Josh, we got to do a call. You got to tell me these shortcuts to get in this system because he banging on these keyboards. He makes it happen. But here's the whole thing. We survived because we had a second string. So what you've got to do is, and I heard these words years ago, and Brandi, this falls down to what's going on with you, which is, did you really inspect to the degree that you needed before this office manager cut the leg? And I'm going to put it this way. She cut your legs out because you had to tell me, I can't do this anymore. I've got to dedicate my time to Flu's Brothers, okay? Because I had to transfer your emails to me because we weren't going to bother you. So I had your emails redirected to me, but I'm missing you so much. But again, you had to take care of your main business, which is Flu's Brothers. And I understood that. And the day you told me that, hey, I'm ready to come back, it's like, okie dokie. And the emails are going out to the clients. And I said, she has limited availability. If you want her back, you better grab her. And I think you were getting them confirmations later that day, Brandi, of saying back, yeah, tell me what I need to do. We're back in business.
Which was wonderful that they wanted to come back after I had to leave them so suddenly. That was just very humbling. And
right.
The reason that I was able to come back is because my current office manager, Rachel, so that all the goodness goes out to her for that.
Yeah. So again, I want to appreciate everybody that's on here today. Donovan, Pablo, others. Here's one thing. If you think that what we're sharing is of value to others, then the highest thing you can do to help others is click that share button and share this out on your own pages, because we're truly trying to give you the information that can help you today. But this is one of the things I'm going to tell you to do is get this book. This is Al Levy's book, The 7-Power Contractor. And it's really a phenomenal work of art. And it's all about business and how to stop this from happening. Because here's the whole thing. You've got to realize when we were younger, people entered a job as a career. Sheryl, do you know how many people used to work at the cotton mill here in town? Every day they would get up, the mill whistle blew, the shift changed, and the people go in and they go out like my grandmother did that worked there the third shift her entire life. That's not today's world. Brandi, what's the average career span of a worker in America today?
3 years. 3 years is what the research tells us.
Correct. And one of the people that hit home with this, and this is one of the people that inspired us or me to build our online training platform, was Bart Ogden, because Bart came to the conclusion that he was going to have to continuously be training new people because of the career life that people had. Because he came to this conclusion too, that in today's world, you get 3 to 4 years, you're doing pretty good. Now, as I look at this, one of our watchers today is a really good friend of mine who has worked in his company for many, many years, and that's Larry on here. Now, but also at the same time, I will guarantee you that Larry understands how much his employer cares for him. They care for him. He feels it. And Larry will be there. And he's been there for a number of years. But it's like right now, and Larry, I hope I'm not divulging private things. Bill's doing special things for Larry right now as Larry goes through some challenges that, and things in life. So Sheryl, what's your thing? What do you tell people to do to be prepared?
Keep your eyes open, mainly keep your ears open, because a lot of times you'll hear other employees telling you what it is, but it's all in the communication also. That's my world, the communication world. So you've got to have these stay interviews, you need the exit interviews. You need to be very precise when you do the original interview, because you need to keep these communications open. And Brandi just had a mishap, and not probably from communications. The only communication she didn't do was believe herself when she first started it. But follow your gut is a good way to do it, and stay ahead of the problem.
Right. And if you look, Larry just made a comment on there and he said, yes, they are. Okay. So Larry, I appreciate you saying that, because I hope everything's getting better for you, brother, and all that of what you're going through right now. But that's what's going on. And see, that's where you've got to be so keen on this. And the other side of this is, and this is where you gotta really become a leader. You can't let these experiences harden you. Okay. And I commonly tell people this: past life experiences will affect your future emotions. There are things that affect you right now that happened when you were younger, things that happened before you even knew it, that affect your emotions. It's like in fact, if you look, it was kind of funny. I come down to my office this morning, there's a little bitty frog sitting there in my office. And if you look on my Facebook page, you'll see that Sheryl said something about, well, good thing it's not a snake. And then Lori, my stepdaughter, said, well, if they had, they'd be a hole in the concrete right now, because that's a deathly fear of mine. But where did that come from? It come from my father being deathly afraid of snakes and imparting that into me. Okay. So this is where you got to be careful because these things will harden you up. If you don't believe it, if you remember growing up, Randy, did you ever have an ornery, nasty old neighbor?
Yes.
Do you remember those days?
Yes.
Because what they were, because of life experiences, had hardened their emotions, had actually hardened them. So, Randy, let's go back to you. Since this episode happened, how cautious were you of putting someone else into that role?
Well, I decided then that the next person would be promoted from within. And actually, my current office manager was a CSR then. And when I did terminate this gal, she came to me and she said, I would like to be considered for the office manager position. She'd only been with me, gosh, I can't remember, 3 or 6 months at that time. And I was ecstatic that she was interested. And I told her that I would want somebody with a year's experience here. And so we waited until she had been here. It was right close to a year or a year before I promoted her into that position, because by then I had built up the trust and I have seen her in action and I knew that she was going to be able to fulfill the duties I needed her to do.
Good. So, without us pumping her up, is she making you happy?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. I mean, she allows me to do my other job, which is coaching.
Yeah, it is. It's a very dedicated thing. So, Cheryl, you're an expert in behavior patterns. Okay. That is part of your training. Okay. You are trained from Ziegler, you're trained from disc assessment and from color coding, which deals with these past life experiences. Okay. Of how it affects us. So, how does a person not let this harden their emotions?
It's very hard not to. You first, number one, have to understand yourself and understand why certain things are triggering you like they do. Once you get a handle on that, then you can actually start looking at the other person's behavior and what they brought to the table and maybe see why they were doing it. I mean, sometimes it's beyond their control, but you have to, number one, understand yourself because usually the other person's not going to change. You can alter your feelings to accept what they're doing only because it's them. And I found out a long time ago, it's easier to forgive somebody than, I don't have to forget, but to forgive that person than it is to harbor those feelings and let them eat you inside, because actually they're not hurting, you're hurting your behavior. And so first look within.
Gotcha. So, is you got it, and I saw this quote the other day online, and I believe it is I believe Tom Ziegler made this, and I'm not going to swear to that, but I think it was one of his father Zig's quotes. And Cheryl, you can verify or clarify this for me. But he said, the longer you wait to start a conversation, the harder it will be. Is that a Zig quote, or did I imagine that?
Zig had something very similar to it. Tom has taken a lot of Zigs and tweaked them into more modern things, but basically with the same concept.
Correct. And see, that's part of, and one of our network connections here is a young lady. Her name is Erin Marcus, and I got to know Erin Marcus through my affiliation with Larry Wingett and others. In fact, she is part of our team here and works in communication. If you go on our website, you'll even see a testimonial from Larry for Erin and myself encouraging people and giving his personal testimonial. But this was what Erin used to work with, which is how to have the hard discussions, how to ask the questions. This is, I see what happens. People get what I call a bug up their butts. Okay. I mean, but think about it a minute. I mean, it's just something poking in there and you're just twisting in your seat and it falls down. Cheryl, what's my classic advice provided by the immortal Barney Fife?
Nip it in the bud.
You've got to have the conversation, because when things get there, here's what happens. We bottle those emotions up inside of ourselves till they explode. And I've actually seen this explode. And this, I believe it's a human failure. And we even see it. And I think it's one of the reasons why we have so much animosity, shall we say, in this world today. Because I know that I can have an open, honest conversation with either of these two ladies. If something that one of them does bothers me, I can talk to them and they can talk to me. We have this agreement. We're not going to get mad at each other. And we all know that when we tell it, we're telling it because we truly care for each other. And that goes to Brandi, even if she wasn't working within our company and said, hey, I'm done tomorrow, which I hope never happens. But that's something that will exist outside of there for many, for my whole life and hopefully for hers. Okay. And that's what you've got to do. You have to become that effective person. You've got to be able to communicate. And communication is not throwing a fit. Communication is not banging on a table. I can well remember, Sheryl and Brandi, and you both know this. I was having a conversation, a virtual conference one day with one of my clients and the general manager for one of his companies. And the general manager was headed in the wrong direction. We could see it, we could sense it. And I asked him a question, and he banged on the table so hard that that keyboard went up in the air and came back down. And I made the biggest mistake with that gentleman right then, because his words were, do you want me to put in my resignation right now? And my answer was no. And thinking back, the answer should have been yes, because that's what eventually had to happen. Because what was happening was the leader was wrecking the culture and wrecking the culture. And I can tell you, in that company today, the culture has changed so much from what we saw from that leadership. And Brandi probably knows exactly who I'm talking about as we go through this. In fact, I've congratulated the people there. You are an example to other people. So that's one of the things to do. I like to hold people up as an example. Recently, I had another client, very quiet person. He's not a person that talks to a lot of people. But recently, he saw where two of his key people, his office manager and his operations manager, were wrecking the culture. And Brandi, he took the step and terminated both in one day.
That's amazing.
That, not only that, Brandi, that is bravery. It's like bravery. Again, go back. When you look at, this is my book. This is my story. And I can tell you that if you look at my life as I rolled it out in these books, that's why I named it Chaos to Reinvention. But I also used to write about something called, and I wrote a chapter in another book one time. And that book was this book right here. Okay. And this was the first book I ever participated in, which was a collaborative book with a lot of editors. Okay. A lot of different writers. But if you look at this book, if it goes down, I titled my chapter, The Magic Moment in Life. The Magic Moment in Life. And what was Jerry's magic moment, Brandi? What do you think that was? That was Jerry's magic moment.
When you lost everything.
Actually, it wasn't. Actually, it wasn't. The magic moment came when I figured it out one day that it was all my fault. The day that it came clear to me that it was my fault. It wasn't the bank's fault. It was no one else's fault. It's like one of the people I love and admire is Larry Winget. And the first time I ever heard a guy, my friend, I've got a really good friend. His name is Ken Warren. And he is like a brother to me. Okay. If I was down, Ken was there, wasn't he, Sheryl? And it really was. And if he's listening right now, we'll be brothers forever because we were that close as we went through this. But as you went through all of this stuff, and I would talk to different people, and I can remember meeting the banker at my store as they were repossessing it and handing him the keys and telling him how it was his fault. I can remember standing on the courthouse steps as they auctioned off our property in that bankruptcy proceedings. But again, it wasn't the bank's fault. It wasn't the attorney's fault. It wasn't the banker's fault. And see, and that's what Larry Winget preached, because he said something one day. He said, you got to realize something. If your sales suck, it's because you suck. And that's the truth in leadership. We had a client that recently hired a GM, and he told the GM, I've had previous people in this position and they failed, but I'm also going to share this with you. It was my fault. It was my fault because I didn't hold them accountable from day one. So again, these are the things that you have to do if you're going to truly lead. You have to be prepared, because life is going to take you on strange paths. This is the world we're in. So Sheryl, is there anything else that you would add about being prepared? And Brandi, I'm coming back to you because I know you got more notes on that paper right there.
Well, before Brandi gets to the notes, I'm just going to put this in. There's a quote that I've heard many times, and I want to say we are talking about all the negative right now and hopefully how to make it positive. And this statement seems to sum it up in one word, and it's out of clutter, find simplicity. From discord, find harmony. And in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And I think we all found an opportunity in all the stories that we told.
Correct. And that's why we shared these with you. One of the things, and like I said, we have to learn from others. So one of the things that Scott McCain has shared with myself and Sheryl is we need to add stories. And so what I did today was I asked each of them, I want one story. I want you to share a story where you were caught totally unprepared and you had to reinvent. And I think we've come across some pretty good ones there. So Brandi, what else is on your notes? Because I am not going to shut this down while you've got value to spit out at these people.
Well, I don't have too much more. I wanted to touch, you talked about Olivia, and I wanted to touch on her. I knew when I hired her that I hired her right out of college, and her passion was education. She really wanted to do something in education. So I knew she wasn't going to be around forever. And she left after a year to go into education. But when my daughter needed a tutor, the first person that came to my mind was Olivia. And so I called her up and asked her if she'd be willing to tutor my daughter. The point being, we have tons of employees that have worked for us in the past, none that we fired, but that have come and gone, and they still come back and visit, and we still talk to them. So don't burn those bridges when they leave. And I think that we've lost some key people over the years. And that day it felt devastating, and it felt like we were never going to get past this. But we came out way better, and our culture came out way better. My pastor at church has a saying that says, the worst thing is never the last thing. And I'll repeat that. The worst thing is never the last thing. And it's going to seem like the very worst thing and the last thing of your company when that person walks out. But it's not. It's actually probably a very good thing.
Well, I know right now I have clients that are hurting right now. Okay, right now at this moment. I'm not sharing names. That's not part of it. But what I'm trying to tell you is you've got to be prepared. In today's world, you got to be prepared for all kinds of chaos to happen. Just remember, it was just a little over a year ago that many parts of this country were shut down unexpectedly due to this COVID crisis that went on. As we look at it, have we changed? You better believe it. Do I like putting a mask on? No way. In fact, I hate those things because if you're male and you shave, those really good masks fray after a while, and you got these little things that tickle your nose after that point. Because I got a flight next week, Cheryl, and I need a new black mask for my next flight because mine is all fuzzy at this point. Do I enjoy that? No, it's part of life. It's just like I remember after 9/11, and all of a sudden you had to go through and the script searching almost. I can remember being pulled out of a telephone line, in a waiting line to get on a plane. Okay. So Jim McKee just asked, when we faced a failure, when employee made huge errors, Steve Blackburn would ask me, did we train them? This was our failure to properly train them. Now I'm going to add this in. Steve Blackburn was a very dear friend of mine who has now left this earth. Okay. And it was a tragic accident. And I can still remember Steve so well. He was so close. But I'm going to tell you something. I learned something from Steve. I learned a lot of things from Steve because Steve was a person that shared with me scripting. Steve is also a person that shared with me the preachings of Michael Gerber and the E-Myth. So Jim, Steve was a person that did a lot and really still and changed this industry a lot in the world that we live in. And we're all miss Steve, but we all learn from him. So I'm going to flash your comment back up there. And that's what we got to look at. Did we train them? This is it. If your management style is failing, it's because you're failing. And what you've got to do is reach out and get help in this. So often failures. It was like what Ashley said about me in her Facebook post the other day that just overwhelmed me because she had actually taken a selfie. Okay. She was walking in the hotel, had been in the class that day. And Cheryl, she was so impressed because of the time that you had spent with her because she had a hiring challenge. And then I gave her some books to read on her way home. And she read that book. And then, she made those comments. So when you look at it, that's why we do this show. This is why we do this broadcast every week, because what we want to do is share value with you. Okay. So, and Brandi, is there anything else you want to add? Did we cover everything from you?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, this is a topic that we could talk about for 2 days straight, but I think we covered it for today.
I think we did. Cheryl, what about you?
I think it's been covered well. I would suggest that everybody take a look around their 360 view and see if they have any problems they might want to take issues with, and stay ahead of the ball game. Communicate with the people.
Right. So before we close out, we're going to remind you of something. Right now, we have just opened up our third coaching group. Okay. We are ready to open the third group. We've got several members on this call right now. Some are one-on-one clients. Some are members of our coaching groups. Some are both. In fact, there's several people on here that are in both our one-on-one programs and also in our coaching groups. So what are our coaching groups all about? It's where we work out challenges for people. It was like just the other day, I think it was yesterday. Brandi, didn't we get the note yesterday from one member of the coaching groups that wanted to know about your stay interviews?
Yep.
How much information do you think they got from yourself, myself, and Cheryl, even though that's your particular area of expertise? I think she got flooded with information, videos, webinars, articles. We shot it out to her like she probably couldn't believe what's there.
Yeah, and she sent a thank you this morning, so I think she said it was
Right.
exactly what she needed. So that was reassuring to hear.
Right. So that's the issue in life and in business today. I know that right now, Cheryl and I have scheduled a phone call with Scott McCain, who is one of our coaches, for Monday afternoon to have a conversation with him because, believe it or not, even as coaches, Cheryl, we got challenges sometimes, don't we?
Quite a few.
I tell you, and the day's been a good one, okay? This has been a good day today for the challenges of the coaching world. But that's what we're here for. We want to help you with your challenges. Like one of them is going to be today's world. And I want you to mark this date down because on October the 29th, we're going to have a very, very special guest. And it's going to be two guests from a source for hiring that is strictly phenomenal of what it's doing. So please mark down your schedule for October 29th to join us for that broadcast because we're going to be rolling out in that broadcast a process that if hiring is a challenge, Brandi, do we have a process?
We do. I've used the process that we're going to be talking about. I started using it 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I've already hired my first person from it. And the feedback from my team is that he is spectacular.
That's it, because it's more than just a hiring system. It is a marketing system. It is an assessment system. It has so much. So, Sheryl, this is where your specialty falls in. So, how big a gold nugget is that October 29th broadcast going to be for people that are looking to increase their teams and recruit people?
This is probably one of the best things I have. Some of my clients that we were hiring for just out with Indeed, another thing, I've brought them into the realm and I still manage their accounts. But the amount of applicants you get they far exceed what you get out of just one ad somewhere.
Okay. So with that, we're going to end today's broadcast. We will be replaying this. And if you think this was of value, please consider sharing it out to others. We do this as a way to offer assistance to our friends, our colleagues, and to strangers, because that's our whole purpose of getting up every morning is we want to provide value. We want to help the people get and turn their business dreams into their business realities in both their business and their lives. So with that, we're CBC Success Group. And if we can help you, you see each of our email addresses on the screen right now. Reach out to one of us, reach out to two of us, reach out to all of us. We'll be happy to set up a phone call, and we would love to help you get past the chaos and develop your systems where you can move forward. And with that, we'll see you next time on our next edition, folks. We appreciate you joining me. It's always such a great thing to be able to share our thoughts and our processes and what we think will work with you. So have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.